The images are just devastating. We've seen cities turn to rubble, and the human cost is almost impossible to grasp. And yet, the fighting just grinds on. It raises a really tough question. With so much destruction, why hasn't a negotiated peace been possible? Why are peace talks completely off the table? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to try and piece together today. You've probably heard this saying before, right? All wars end in negotiation. It's one of those things that sounds true, something we kind of hope is true. But the war in Ukraine seems to be breaking that rule. To really understand what's happening and where this might be headed, we have to figure out why this conflict is so tragically different. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll tackle the negotiation puzzle itself. Then we'll get into why this is an indivisible conflict, basically why you can't just meet in the middle. We'll look at why sanctions and diplomatic pressure haven't worked, and then try to understand Russia's internal logic. And finally, we'll lay out the possible scenarios for the future.
Okay, let's just get right to the core question. If both sides are suffering immense losses, if their economies are hurting and their people are dying, simple logic would tell you that they'd be scrambling to find a deal, but they're not. And understanding why they're not is really the key to this entire conflict.
A lot of people think this war is just about land or about Ukraine potentially joining NATO, but that's really just scratching the surface. The real fight, the one that's fueling all this bloodshed, is about something much deeper. It's about something that can't be divided, traded, or compromised on. I mean, just look at this. This is what's left of the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. When you see destruction on this scale, you have to ask yourself, what could possibly be worth this much? And the answer, for both sides, is incredibly simple: survival. This isn't a dispute over a border, it's an existential struggle. And here we have it. This is really the heart of the matter. The analyst Robert Persson argues that the true cause is the simple fact that a free, prosperous, democratic Ukraine on Russia's border is an existential threat to Putin's autocratic regime. A successful Ukraine offers a dangerous example for the Russian people, and for Putin, that's a threat he just can't tolerate. You know, when Russia's initial plan for a quick victory failed, the rhetoric changed dramatically. The quiet part got said out loud. It was no longer a special military operation. The goal, in their own words, became the liquidation of Ukraine's nationhood. And how exactly do you negotiate with someone whose stated goal is to erase you from existence? So you end up with this impossible situation. For Vladimir Putin, any outcome where Ukraine remains a sovereign, independent state is a loss. For Ukraine, giving up their sovereignty means everything they've fought and died for was for nothing. Ceding land means abandoning their own people. It's a true zero-sum game. There is no middle ground. Okay, so if you can't bargain, what's the next tool in the toolbox? You try to apply pressure. You use sanctions, you send weapons, you make threats. But what happens when that doesn't work either? This brings us to our next point: the failure of what academics call coercive diplomacy. Coercive diplomacy is an interesting concept. It's not about physically beating your opponent into submission on the battlefield. It's about using threats and pressure to persuade them that stopping their aggression is a better option than continuing. It's a defensive strategy, a way of saying, back down or else. But here's the problem. For coercive diplomacy to actually work, a few things need to be true. And as scholar Sean Monahan lays out, none of them apply here. Russia is simply more motivated. The West is more afraid of escalation. Western goals have been all over the place. And Putin believes he has time on his side. Plus, when you're telling Russia you want to weaken it, you're confirming their worst fears, which makes them dig in even deeper. So what we've really seen is a strategy of attrition, not persuasion. It's been all stick and no carrot. The idea has been to inflict enough pain on Russia through sanctions and military losses that they're forced to stop. But it hasn't been a true diplomatic effort to persuade them to stop. It's a contest of endurance. All right, let's shift gears and try to look at this from inside the Kremlin. To really get why Russia is so unwilling to back down, we need to understand its history of military conflicts and, maybe most importantly, the fact that this is essentially a one-man show. Looking back, as analysis from Ariel Cohen shows, Russia has a long and often painful track record of miscalculation. From the Crimean War to Afghanistan to Chechnya, there's a recurring pattern of underestimating their opponents and overestimating their own capabilities, often with disastrous consequences back home. Putin is a student of this history, and he's desperate not to become just another chapter in that book. And here's what makes this situation so incredibly dangerous. This isn't really Russia's war, it's Putin's war. In his system, all meaningful decisions flow from him. He's reportedly isolated, surrounded by people who won't challenge him, and he views this conflict as the defining moment of his historical legacy. It's very, very difficult to negotiate with someone who sees this as their destiny. Now, we shouldn't underestimate Russia's capacity to wage war. They've put their economy on a war footing, they have huge manpower reserves, and a high tolerance for casualties. But there are serious cracks in the foundation. Their command structure is rigid, they're losing troops and equipment at an absolutely staggering rate, and their modern weapons rely on Western components they can no longer easily get. And this brings us to the fundamental problem of trust. Even if, by some miracle, you could get Putin to sit down and sign a peace treaty, why would anyone believe he'd honor it? As Robert Person points out, his entire career is a testament to breaking promises and undermining agreements. There's what's known as a credible commitment problem, and it's a huge barrier to any deal. So we've established why traditional peace talks seem impossible right now. But a war can't last forever. It has to end somehow. So the question becomes, how? What are the possible pathways out of this, even if they're difficult to look at? Analyst Robert Person basically lays out 4 potential futures. The first is Western withdrawal, leading to a Ukrainian defeat. The second is what you might call losing attrition, where aid trickles in but it's not enough, and Russia's size eventually wins out. The third is a frozen conflict, like the Korean Peninsula, with a heavily armed border but no real peace. And the fourth scenario is a decisive Ukrainian victory, pushing Russian forces out entirely. And really, it all boils down to this one critical point. According to bargaining theory, a genuine negotiation can't even begin until at least one side loses the belief that it can achieve its goals through more fighting. As long as Putin believes he's winning or that he can win, he will continue to fight. The only path to the table is to change that calculation in his head. And if you need a final, chilling reminder of why trust is so impossible, just look at this quote from Dmitry Medvedev, a top Russian official. He's essentially saying that any agreement would just be a temporary pause, a chance for Russia to rearm before coming back to crush the reptile. It shows that for them, a negotiation isn't an end to the conflict. It's just a tactic within it. So where does all of this leave us? If a negotiated settlement is a fantasy, and any ceasefire is just seen as a trap, what's left? It forces us to ask a very difficult question. What is the true price of a lasting peace in Ukraine? And maybe more importantly, is the world willing to pay it?